not Shabbat Shalom. Good day. Hello. Welcome to our broadcast tonight. It is Tuesday, not Shabbat. But we carry Shabbat with us every day, right? Yeah, no. It is actually the month of Adar, too, now. I wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit. I know we touched on it a bit when we entered into the month of Adar 1. Adar 2, this is one of those years when they add an extra month. You know, it's funny because it's actually a leap year for us. We had the extra day. We had February 29th added to our year. But on the Jewish calendar, they add an entire month about 7 times in 13 years. So I'm not sure exactly what that pans out to be, but they add an entire month to keep it on track. You look at the Islamic calendar, which is also a lunar-based calendar, they do not add the extra month. So you have Ramadan, which can occur at any time in the year. Ramadan is going on. I believe it started already. It's going on right now. We've been in Israel in August, and Ramadan's going on. So in order to keep the festival cycle where it's supposed to be, they have to add that extra month so that we don't have Passover in the fall time, because it is a spring feast. But it's interesting that they add an extra month of Adar. The month of Adar is a significant month. We talked about it, again, touching on it a little bit in the first Adar. But the saying is that when the month of Adar comes in, when it enters, you increase in joy. And so the rabbis say that considering that there's 2 months of Adar, that means you have an extra month where you're to increase your joy even more. And so a lot of people look at that and say, how is that even possible? Like, how can you walk in joy for 60 days in a row? It's kind of like what we're talking about during the whole fast, and like, can you sustain a habit for 21 days? Can you keep this going for longer than that? And I think it comes back to that whole idea of behavior modification versus heart transformation. It's are you trying to put on joy from the outside, or is it coming from the inside out? If you're trying to put joy on from the outside, you're not going to be able to sustain it. You know, it's not the same as happiness. And it's not saying be happy for 60 days, though joy can certainly produce happiness. But if you were to look at it in that sense, it's not, okay, you think of happy, you laugh, so you're going to have a laughter fest for 60 days. That's not sustainable. Like, I mean, it's good for you to laugh, and they say that belly laughter every day is very good for your health. We'll kind of touch on that a little bit later. But the point is that it's about the joy. And I want to kind of get into a little bit more about joy. I know that we've touched on this before. But the tradition says that Adar has the power to transform sadness into joy and darkness into light. In the Jewish months, it is the thread that weaves hope into the fabric of our lives. I like that. So Adar is the thread that weaves hope into our lives, reminding us that no matter the darkness, light is just around the corner. I think of the Chosen episode where John it's actually the one where they're called the Sons of Thunder and all that. But in the midst of it is this whole theme of the John 1. In the beginning was the Word was with God. And it goes down to the point of the light has overcome the darkness, and the darkness can never put it out. And I think that if you look at it, that's the story of the Jewish people, really. And by extension, the story of the Church of Yeshua, the story of the believers in Yeshua right from the early times on. I mean, it's a miracle that, if you wanted to give a name to it, Christianity or followers of the way, it's a miracle that it's survived through these last centuries, the last couple millennia. With all the persecution they've had, they've held on to the faith. And we can tend to focus on all the negative that's going on in the world. We can focus on the darkness out there. And yes, the darkness is getting darker. But our whole purpose is to be light. When Yahweh created everything, in the beginning, the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the deep. And he said, light be. He didn't just sit there and say, yeah, it's really dark out there. If we're created in his image, we're created to be the light in this world, that now that Yeshua lives within us, He is the light. He is our light. He is our salvation. He is the one who gives us that light to shed into this world. We can't just sit here and say how dark it is out there. Our job is to go and shine the light and speak the light, speak the life into the darkness of the night. But, you know, obviously one of the central things of Adar is the Purim story, and we're going to be talking about that more next week. But it's unique among all the holidays because there were no open miracles. It was in the whole book of Esther, God's name isn't even mentioned. It's not like the book of Exodus where, yeah, God splits the sea and there's all these things. There was no oil burning for 8 days like during Hanukkah. There was none of these open miracles. But there was something that was almost even greater than that happened during the Purim story because we could see Yahweh without miracles. You could see him at work. Just the miracle of the events that took place in and of themselves, you know, we could see him at work. And so it kind of gives us that picture of Adar that when Yahweh is with you, you can always have joy. You can always be happy. You know, we had that phrase that we were saying, we are so happy. And it's easy to let things slide through the years, especially as things happen. And sometimes life just doesn't go the way we planned, the way that we saw it would happen. I know that for many of us, maybe it can be a thing where, yeah, you know, I pictured my life being such and such. I pictured my life that this was going to be my destiny. But then over the course of time and events that happen, our entire destiny seems like it's changed. But maybe it wasn't changed. Maybe we just found out what our true destiny was, and everything else was preparation for it. But life might not always be easy. There was never any promise that the life as a believer would be easy. You know, he said, take my yoke upon you, for my yoke is easy, but it didn't say that the way would be easy. It said narrow is the way that leads to life. You know, it's a narrow, rocky road sometimes. And it can seem like we're going against the grain, because we are going against the grain of culture. But that's what we're called to. But even in the midst of life not being as we might always want it, with Yahweh, if we're with Yahweh, nothing can go wrong. You know, nothing that the enemy means for evil can touch us, can affect us. And that's really where it's the light in the land of Goshen, where we're really learning how to live like the children of Israel in the midst of the plagues. You know, some things we can't faith away. We can't faith away things that the Word says are going to happen in the end times, including persecution. You know, there's a lot of Christians that want to faith away persecution. No, I'm not going to be persecuted for my faith. No, you can't faith that away. Yeshua said, if they hate me, they're going to hate you. It comes with the territory. What we've got to do is learn how do we walk in the midst of it in a place of victory. How do we walk in such a place? I mean, just look at the disciple John. I'd say he was heavily persecuted. You know, they attempted to boil him in a pot of oil, but he wouldn't boil. You know, so it doesn't matter what they tried to do to him. Fine, we'll lock him away on the Isle of Patmos, and then he can't do anything. And he writes the entire book of Revelation. You know, so no matter what they tried to do, they persecuted him, but it didn't penetrate. It was not able to take him out. And he was the only one of the disciples, in fact, who died in peace. He was not martyred. He died in peace. And so there is the possibility of us walking in victory in the midst of it, but we got to know how do we guide our own lives? How do we walk in such a way that we are in that place of protection? That even when the stuff is coming against us, it can't penetrate us. And we've talked about this in the sense of, you know, diseases going on around us, or you know, whatever might be affecting the world financially and not affecting us. How do we stay in heaven's economy? How do we stay in the place of divine health and garden status? That's what we're meant to walk in. But you know, in John, he said, the John's letters, he says that he desires us to be in health even as our soul prospers. If your soul's sick, your body can't go on very well. And if your soul's sick, things are going to start falling apart in your life in general. So it's finding out how do we get our entire being in line with what Yahweh wants from us. And so we kind of get this glimpse in Purim, in the month of Adar, that Yahweh wants us to be in a place of joy. And it's the joy of having a future and a hope. Like Jeremiah 29:11. He has plans for you, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, to give you hope and a future. And that's what he wants for us, but we have to stay in line with him. We can't get out of alignment with him and expect that everything's going to go well in our lives. And if we start finding that more and more things are penetrating through that protective shield around us, and more things are happening to us that shouldn't happen, then we got to do a checkup and say, where am I missing it? Where am I not coming into alignment with his protection like I should? And so, you know, we're coming now into the springtime. Yay! We're kind of having an early spring here, though we didn't really have a very hard winter this year. But hallelujah, we're starting to get that sense of spring in the air, and you know, spring brings that sense of hope, that sense of renewal, and you know, there's a lot of people who struggle with seasonal depression in the winter time, just because of the darkness, the coldness, and people tend to be shut up in their houses more, especially in the Western cultures. But springtime is like a sense of it brings with it a sense of joy, but a joy of a satisfaction that comes from finally I can do something. You know, it's not a joy of, oh, I can just sit here. You know, we've been sitting here all winter. Like, let's do something. It's a joy that comes from being able to step into a cycle that's renewing itself. You know, we can get so bogged down in cycles in this life, especially for some of us, if we tend to be overthinkers about things. You know, it's like, okay, well, I got to do this, and then I got to get this done, and then I got to get this done today. And sometimes it seems like most of life is kind of the definition of insanity. Okay, I mean, what is the definition of insanity? It's doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. Well, I mean, if you just went by and thought about it, if you just went by the working definition of insanity, then most of life carries a hint of insanity about it. I mean, you think of it. You empty the trash bin just for it to fill up again. You go and clean the litter box just for them to, sometimes seconds later, go and use it again. You wash the dishes, and suddenly the sink is filled with dishes again. You make your bed, and then you go and sleep in it at night again. And so it can seem, making meals. You know, I make breakfast, and now it's suddenly time for lunch, and now it's, if you eat lunch, now it's suddenly time for supper. And you go through these cycles, and it seems like I'm just caught in this repetition of over and over again, I'm doing the same thing. So I guess in some ways, maybe all of us are a little bit insane. But I mean, we kind of have to do that type of stuff. But if you get caught in that, you know, never-ending cycle of repetition that seems like there's no end in sight, like when will the laundry end? When will the dishes end? When will this alarm end that I have to wake up so early to go to work in the morning, and you want to turn it off and say, no, let me sleep. But if you get bogged down in the frustration of it all, sometimes you might find yourself like the man who wrote Ecclesiastes, you know, vanity, vanity, it's all vanity, you know, and that's kind of a not a good way to look at life. It's certainly not helpful, to say the least, and there are people saying, I think all of us can be guilty of that in some days, and in some ways of being like, what's the use of this all? You know, some people, fine, I'm just not going to work at all. I'm pulling my covers back over my head, you know. But it's easy to fall into that trap of despair, of defeat, when life seems insane and futile, when it seems like, is there any purpose in it? And especially when it's hard for you to envision anything different. Like, is there anything after this point? Like, is there anything more to life? There's got to be more to life than this. And that's when you ask yourself, when will this end? Why am I doing the same thing over and over and nothing changes? The fact is, some of life might not change. You're always going to have dishes to do. You're always going to have laundry to do. As long as you're on this earth, you're going to have laundry to do. When we're in heaven, that's one of the things that Mom always says is going to be so awesome, that we're not going to have to do laundry because we'll be clothed in the glory. But until that point, please keep doing your laundry and please keep getting dressed. But there is a difference. There is a difference between joy and happiness. And that's what it all comes down to. If we're looking for happiness in life, we'll find that life is disappointing. If you're looking for your source of happiness, and look at some of the most wealthy people in the world. Some of the multi-millionaires, billionaires, they have all the yachts, they have multiple houses, they go on all these vacations, but yet they don't seem happy because they're looking for an outside source to bring them an inside satisfaction that only Yahweh can bring, and so happiness has to do with external feelings. You can be happy when you get a new job. You can be happy when you get a new car. You can be happy when you get new clothes. Whatever makes you happy. Happy when you go on vacation. Happy when you I don't know, whatever it is. Yeah, whatever you have as your source of happiness in the natural. But joy isn't dependent on the external things. It depends on the internal state. And so that means you can have joy even when you're not happy. It's like the concept of faith. Faith, you walk by faith and not by sight. You're not looking at the things which are seen. You're looking at the things which are not seen. You're fixing your eyes on the things above, not on the things on this earth. It has nothing to do with your senses. It has to do with an internal state of being. It's so much more powerful than just a fleeting emotion. Joy can sustain you through a lot of stuff that happiness will never do. Psalm 63 verse 7 says, "Because you have been my help, therefore in the shadow of your wings will I rejoice." Now you hear that, will I rejoice? It's a choice. It's an act of your will. Another translation says, "In the shadow of your wings I sing for joy." So in the shadow of your wings, I'm choosing to sing for joy. And if we really look and examine, I encourage you to go do this at some point, go and examine the book of Ecclesiastes. It does not teach us that life is meaningless. He has the moments of vanity, it's all vanity. But it's really looking at the realization that life is of a great value. And taking the value in the small things in life and not overlooking them, like is the tendency. It's just daily and all that. And sometimes we take things for granted. But, look at the sunset. Look at the sunrises. We could live in a world that's black and white. Think of, Yahweh didn't have to create everything in color. He didn't have to create beautiful sunrises and sunsets. That's just for us to enjoy. And so if we really start focusing on those little things in life and saying, Yahweh, you're creating this opportunity for me to increase my joy because I'm seeing an aspect of you at work. If we start taking those opportunities, then we'll find that our state of being, our internal state, will be a lot more at rest than if we're just hurrying through our life and not even noticing things. And so without Yahweh is when things tend to fall into meaningless repetition. And we're just going about whatever we think is expected or required of us, but without purpose, without shalom, without joy. And that's not what it's supposed to be. If you want to stay sane, if you want to find meaning in this life, don't depart from righteousness. Don't depart from what Yahweh says. Don't depart from His word, because that's going to be the only thing that keeps you straight, keeps you sane. I think Rick Renner has a book about how to keep your head on straight in a world gone crazy. And again, just look around you at all the craziness going on in this world. I'm sure many of you have seen the news of what's going on in Haiti. I mean, we've got cannibal gangs running through the streets in Haiti right now. That's crazy. That's demonic. That's not normal human beings. That's the evidence of someone who has given themselves over entirely to Satan. But if they can give themselves entirely over to Satan in that way, then we can believe for the people who are believers in that country to rise up and give themselves entirely over to Yahweh. And that's when you can start seeing a change go on in that country. But for us, everything is on a cycle. We have the cycle of the months. We have Rosh Chodesh that comes around. And it seems to come around faster and faster every time. I looked at the calendar and I'm like, it's already Rosh Chodesh, wow. The months are moving by faster and faster. And the seasons are on a cycle. And, I honestly, I think we're blessed to live in New England where we do get all the seasons. You live somewhere like Florida, or it might be nice for everybody who likes warmth out there, but you don't get to see the beauty of the fall colors. You don't get to see the crisp morning air. You don't get to experience the changing of the seasons, which really help you get into Yahweh's cadence in life. He has everything on a cycle for a reason. And when you look at Adar, like I said, Adar is the month when it says, when Adar enters, you increase in joy. The opposite of that is the month of Av. In the month of Av, it says you decrease your joy. If you look at them, they're about 6 months apart. So you have this cycle of every 6 months. It's like a cycle. And we might not like the whole idea of decreasing the joy, and we're not going to focus on that because it's not Av right now. But that whole thing had to do with repentance anyway, and that's a necessary part of life. But when we're looking at the repetitive, nature of the year and the cycles, we're coming into spring and then summer and fall and winter, even the tides. You look at the tides of the ocean. They ebb and they flow, and they're on this cycle, and you can predict it. But in that cycle, there's variations. Sometimes it's more in than others. Sometimes you have these astronomical high tides, and depending on where you are in the world, you experience greater or less of a tide. And so it is in the spirit. When we're moving through the seasons in the spirit, there can be shifts in the spirit that require us to alter our course differently, to change how we're dressing, to change how we're approaching things. And that's why we got to be so in tune with Holy Spirit. We've got to stay ever so closely tied together with Him, knitted together with Him. But even in the cycles, and as we start preparing for the next season, and that's the biggest thing is, you come into the fall, what's the biggest thing people are doing? Preparing for the winter season. Whether it be winterizing things, whether it be making sure you have enough wood to stock up your fireplace, whatever it is, you got to prepare for the next season to come. You don't run into the winter and then say, oh my goodness, I don't have wood, I don't have this. Some people might do that, and that's not the best way to go about life. It is better to be prepared ahead of time. And you find that you walk through life in a sense of, a greater sense of shalom if you're prepared for something ahead of time. But as you're moving through life spiritually, you prepare for things and you're walking through, let's say even when we came through this whole season of fasting, which I know some of us are still continuing on with certain things, we can find ourselves going along and finding that we're making a lot of progress and starting to pick up speed and we're really doing great. And then all of a sudden something comes along that derails us. You know what I mean by derail? What happens if a train derails? It means that it accidentally leaves its tracks. It wasn't a purposeful thing, and nobody plans to derail a train. And even though it's an accident, sometimes if the train derails, it causes all the cars behind it to crash, and it can cause injury to people around. And so, there was one back in 2021 that it was like an Amtrak train, and it derailed, and it killed 3 passengers and injured 49. There's a derailing of the Green Line just the other day. I saw that come up on my newsfeed. So train derailments happen quite often, but they're not supposed to happen any more than plane crashes, any more than, like, built into that train is certain safety mechanisms, is the ability to keep it on track and helping it to arrive safely at its destination. So what you know is if something derailed, something caused that to happen that was not supposed to happen. And there was an error in some way. And so a lot of times when they've investigated it, it can be a mistake by an engineer. It could be a flaw on the track. Like the track could have something on it that causes the train to derail. It could be the what do they call it? I was going to say pilot. What is the conductor? The conductor of the train could be going too fast in a place where he shouldn't be going fast. That's happened before. Fly around a corner at 150 miles an hour, and when the track you're supposed to go 40 miles an hour, that's not a good recipe. But all these things can lead to a train derailing. And so spiritually, when we find that we're getting derailed off of our course, we got to do an investigation and say, how did this happen? I thought I was doing good. I thought I was on track. Something happened that knocked me off track. And of course, the easy thing to do is to point fingers at other people and say, well, they caused me to get off track, and they did this. But we gotta shut all that out, because ultimately, when it comes down to it, you're the only one who is in control of you. You're in control of your own responses. Galatians 5:7 says, you were running a good race. Who stopped? Who hindered you from following or obeying the true way? And the voice says, who has impeded your progress and kept you from obeying the truth? You were off to such a good start. In the Message, it says, you were running superbly. Who cut in on you, deflecting you from the true course of obedience? This detour doesn't come from the one who called you in the race in the first place. And please don't toss this off as insignificant. It's not insignificant when we get thrown off course. It's not insignificant when we get derailed or knocked off of our track, because it doesn't just affect us. When, again, like I said, when trains derail, it affects many people. You remember the whole thing that happened out in, I think it was Ohio or Pennsylvania, when there was a train that derailed and it was carrying all these toxic chemicals. They're still dealing with the effects of that in the water system out there. So it can have wide range effects. Better to prevent if you know that there's something in your say in your tracks, and there's something in your path that has the potential to derail you. Better to deal with it ahead of time, fix it, so that when you get to that point, you can stay on track. Doesn't mean that the enemy's not going to try to throw things at you. He's a master at throwing things, and he knows your buttons. He knows exactly what to throw at you that will get you off track. You know, what gets somebody else off track might not get you off track. What gets you off track might not get somebody else off track. But the question is, do you have a joy that can be easily taken? Are you easily stressed about things? Do you find the little things that are derailing your joy and peace? And often it is the little things. You know, it's not, most of these derailments are not that, oh, well, there was a car in the middle of the train track and that caused the train to go off track. No, it's often these slight malfunctionings, these slight mistakes in engineering, these slight things that cause it to not stay on its tracks the right way. And a lot of times with us, you know, we find, and I would say a lot of times it's a buildup of things. A lot of times we find if we're not dealing with the things as they come along properly, there's such a buildup of things that all of a sudden we just find we kind of implode or explode. It depends on which way we go. But our life kind of like, blah, we just kind of like have this explosion, and everybody else around is like, what just happened? What was that all about? But it was not that isolated incidents. It was something internally that was going on all along that was building up that we weren't dealing with. So again, when we said joy and happiness are not the same, if your joy is being easily taken, then you're trying to find joy in outer things, in outer circumstances, in whatever material things you might have in life. whatever it might be for you. Joy comes from abiding in the presence of Yahweh. That's the only place you're going to find that true joy. Joy can create an emotion, but it's more than a fleeting emotion. It's a state of being. And how many of us are happy when difficult times hit us? You know, I mean, somebody cuts you off in traffic. Do you feel happy? Are you like, oh, this is the best day of my life, somebody cut me off? You know, is that your instant emotion? Probably not. For most of us, probably not. How many times are you happy, you have the emotion of happiness when things are not pleasant? You generally can't be happy unless circumstances are right and things are going along the way you want them to go. So if our source of joy is by abiding in the presence of Yahweh, then when we find ourselves with a lack of joy, then we have discovered what's actually a symptom of the actual problem. Our actual problem, if we're finding a lack of joy in our life, is a lack of Yahweh. We're not abiding in His presence. We're not staying in His presence. We might, and sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it's not that, well, I haven't touched my Bible in 5 weeks. That's an obvious thing. But sometimes it's just, well, I let this slip a little bit. Or I spent 5 minutes less today. Or I let this get in the way of spending time with Yahweh. I just wanted to sit down and watch my favorite movie series for one night. I'll spend time with Yahweh the next night. Those little things can start to build up and start to cause us to not be abiding in the presence of Yahweh. There's nothing wrong with those things, and we talked about that with the fasting. A lot of the fasting is not getting things out of our life that are bad. It's just something that's taking us from the presence of Yahweh. And we need to make sure that we're abiding in His presence. Let's turn over to Nehemiah chapter 8. It's a familiar verse, but I want us to actually put it before our eyes. Nehemiah chapter 8. We'll start at verse 9. And Nehemiah, who was the governor, and Ezra, the priest and scribe, and the Levites, who taught the people, said to all of them, "This day is holy to the Lord your God. Mourn not, nor weep." For all the people wept when they heard the words of the law. Now, you got to put this in context. This is when, for a long time, the people didn't have the Word of God. They were living in lives that were not in alignment with the Word, but they didn't even have the Word. They had lost it. Like, how do you lose the Bible? How do you lose that? They literally lost the Word of God. And so they find the book of the law in the temple and bring it out, and they're reading it to the people. And so the people are now realizing we've not been living in accordance with that. And, you know, Nehemiah's words are very interesting because it says this day is holy to the Lord your God. And I think in our minds we think of holiness as being somber. Holiness is walking around, you know, kind of with your hands folded, don't smile. But he's contradicting that idea in this. This day is holy to the Lord your God, mourn not nor weep. So holiness is not being sad. Far from it. Verse 10, then Ezra told them, "Go your way, eat the fat, drink the sweet drink, and send portions to him for whom nothing is prepared, for this day is holy to the Lord our God. And be not grieved and depressed, for the joy of the Lord is your strength and stronghold." So the Levites quieted all the people, and saying, "Be still, for the day is holy, and do not be grieved and sad." Now they say it 3 times here. Don't be grieved, don't be sad. And verse 12, all the people went their way to eat, drink, send portions, and make great rejoicing, for they had understood the words that were declared to them. That's a cause of rejoicing. When you understand the words and you're internalizing them, it brings joy. It means, and they're weeping for what we could say is good reason. They're realizing they were so far away from God. But crying does not bring you closer to God. It's changing your ways that does. And so now they're understanding what the words, and they're internalizing it, and that's causing great rejoicing to them. Because it's like, now I have the ability to stay on track. It's giving them the ability to see what their error was. If you can't even see your error, you can't correct it. It's giving them the ability to see their error, and now they're saying, our life can go forward from here because we have the Word again. So it's not a sad thing. It's holy. It's set apart to the Lord, but it's not sad. And again, this is a familiar verse to us. Be not grieved and depressed, for the joy of the Lord is your strength and stronghold. Some translations say refuge. The joy of the Lord is your refuge. I like that. I looked it up in a few different translations. One of them says, do not be saddened this day, for rejoicing in the Lord is your strength. So don't be sad. Rejoicing in the Lord is your strength. What is the verse? I think it's in Philippians where it says, rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. We're supposed to rejoice in Him regardless of our feelings. Your joy is in Him. And another translation says, let the Eternal's own joy be your protection. That's the Voice translation. I like that. Let the Eternal's own joy be your protection. So in His presence is fullness of joy. It says in Psalm 16:11. In His presence is fullness of joy. So if joy is found in the presence of the Lord, and you see that joy is your strength, then if you're finding that you're having a lack of joy in your life, a lot of times what goes side by side with that is you have a lack of strength, lack of energy. Going around, hardly have the energy to do the day's tasks, you have a lack of joy. It's all coming back to that root of dwelling in His presence. Proverbs 24:10 says, if you falter at a time of trouble, how small is your strength? Again, ties right into the fact that the joy of the Lord is your strength. So you could say, if you falter in a time of trouble, how small is your joy? How small is your joy? How small is your strength? If you haven't learned to live in joy continuously, then weakness can set in. And that's when the enemy can get you. That's when he can start to derail you. That's when he can catch you off guard with things. Joy is found in the presence of the Lord. So if we want to be filled with His joy, I think all of us want to be having that joy in our lives, then we have to practice His presence. He is with us, but we need to be living in a constant state of awareness of His presence. 1 Chronicles 16:27 says, splendor and majesty are before Him, strength and joy in His dwelling place. So again, there's that joy and strength paired together, and it's in His dwelling place. Read Psalm 91. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High. If you're dwelling in His secret place, you're dwelling in the place of strength and joy. It all goes hand in hand. Another translation says, splendor and majesty are found in His presence. Strength and joy are found in His place, His sanctuary. So if you're looking for joy, or you're looking for happiness in all the wrong places, find the joy in His sanctuary. Another translation says, His temple is a place of power and joy. Another translation says, majesty and honor march before Him, strength and gladness walk beside Him. So if you want to walk with God, you're walking with strength and gladness. That's just like Moses, when he spent the time in the presence of the Lord, he came and his face was glowing. You can't spend the time with the Lord really abiding with Him and not take on some of His characteristics. That's why we say all the time, bad companionships, evil companionships corrupt good character. You start hanging around with people who are talking bad and doing things that we shouldn't do, eventually it's going to start wearing down on you, and you're going to start picking up some of that attitude, that way of life. Well, the opposite is true. If you start hanging around with people who are of stronger faith than you and that are on the path, they're going to strengthen you on your path. You start hanging around with Yahweh, you start spending time abiding with Him, you're going to pick up on some of His joy, His strength, His shalom. It's going to rub off on you. You can't help it. It's just part of His presence. There is joy in his presence, and the nearer we are to him, the closer we are to him, the more we'll be filled with joy. You know, look at Paul and Silas. You know, they're singing praises in prison. They had joy. They didn't have happiness. I'm sure in their situation, their emotions were not happy. You know, like, how many of us would be happy if we're locked up in prison and we've just been beaten? But they were able to rise above their circumstances because they had an inner joy that nobody could take away. And that's the most powerful place to be. If you have a source of something inside of you that nobody can take away, that puts you in a place of strength that nobody can touch. That puts you in a place where nothing can defeat you. Because your joy, your strength, your shalom is from another source. It's not from this world. It's not from the things around you. Psalm 16, 8 and 9 says, I know the Lord is always with me. I will not be shaken, for he is right beside me. No wonder my heart is filled with joy and my mouth shouts his praise. My body rests in safety. So that true joy that the psalmist is talking of, it's coming from his spending time with Yahweh. He says, no wonder my heart is filled with joy, because he's with me. If your joy comes from the fact that Yahweh is with you, nothing can defeat you, nothing can take him on. He's the one who created everything that even exists. He created the universe. These little problems that we're dealing with in life, what does Paul refer to them as? Temporary, brief, and fleeting. You know, anytime something starts to get your goose, something starts to get under your skin, just stop for a moment and think, is this something that's going to matter a month from now? Is it going to matter 10 minutes from now? Oftentimes it's not. Is this really going to matter in light of eternity? You know, think of one day as 1,000 years, 1,000 years as a day. How many brief and fleeting things happen in that time that don't even register on the scape of world events? So we shouldn't give them that much thought. They should not be able to derail us. They should just, you know, we just keep moving on beyond them. But it's a choice. Proverbs 15:15 says, all the days of the desponding and afflicted are made evil by anxious thoughts and forebodings, but he who has a glad heart has a continual feast regardless of circumstances. So glad heart, joyfulness in your heart, you're going to have a continual feast regardless of circumstances. Another translation says, when a man is gloomy, everything seems to go wrong. When he is cheerful, everything seems right. Isn't that the case? You ever have just like a bad day in general? You wake up on the wrong side of the bed or something, and then everything seems to go wrong? And like even the cat can't do anything right, and this person is cutting you off, and it's like the entire world seems wrong. When in reality, you're just seeing it through not rose-colored lenses. You're seeing it through dark-colored lenses. You're seeing it through your mood. You're seeing it through whatever internally is going on inside of you. So many things in life are really dependent on our outlook on them, our attitude. You know, it's that whole seeing the glass half full or half empty. It's your choice how you're going to look at the situation in life. Life gives you lemons, make lemonade. You know, some people might cry about the situations in life. Other people might say, this is an opportunity for me to step up higher. Like that story that Dad used to tell about the child, the little boy in the room with the manure. They were trying to fix the boy who was optimistic. He was always optimistic about everything. And they stuck him in a room filled with manure. And the boy who was pessimistic, they put him in a room full of toys. Because that should change you. Like if it can be changed from the outside, it should be able to change you. You're in a room full of toys. But the pessimistic boy is like, well, this might break, and I don't think I can use this, and I don't know how this works. And he found something negative about it, because that was his internal state. And the boy who was too optimistic, they said, you know, put him in a room full of manure, that will cure him. And they go in, and he's going, wee, wee, and he's shoveling the manure, and they're like, what are you doing? He's like, with all this manure in here, there's got to be a pony somewhere. It's all about how you look at life. You know, I mean, circumstances are circumstances. You can have two people in the same circumstances, and one is joyful, and one is in the pits. I mean, I always look at when we would go down to Haiti and some of our sponsored children, and you'd see these little children and they're happy. I mean, you give them a stick of gum and you have one who's chewing the gum and one who's licking the wrapper, and they're the happiest children. And then you look at some of the children here who they're not grateful for anything they have. And you know, you have people here who complain about not having enough and not having this and that. Okay, you know what? How can two people be in the same circumstances, but they have an entirely different attitude? Because it's coming from within them. It's not coming from without. You can't blame the outer circumstances on where you are in life. And your joy is not dependent on someone else. That should be a reason to rejoice in and of itself. Because you don't have to look to anybody else or anything else to give you that joy. Just Yahweh. Another translation of Proverbs 15:15 says, a miserable heart means a miserable life. A cheerful heart fills the day with song. You know, do you have a miserable heart? I hope not. I hope none of us have a miserable heart. I'm not talking to anybody in this room. I'm talking to somebody maybe out on the internet. Do you find yourself irritated at somebody who's walking around singing a song? You ever find yourself that like somebody's walking around, they're just singing a song because they're happy? And if you find that irritating you, then maybe you need to change. Maybe you need to find out what they have that you might want to take on. Just saying. 1 Thessalonians 5:16 says, be joyful always. Now, it doesn't say be happy always. It says be joyful always. It's a command. You want to talk about New Testament commands? People are so quick to say, well, that's Old Testament. Let's look at the New Testament. Okay, this is a New Testament command. Be joyful always. So we should be walking with that joy in us. 1 Peter 1:8 says, whom having not seen you love, though now you do not see him, yet believing you rejoice with joy inexpressible and full of glory. Joy unspeakable and full of glory. So you're rejoicing in just the fact that you know him, that you're destined for heaven. That's a reason to rejoice. Romans 15:13 says, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace. Now there's a combination. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace. Joy and shalom. So you have hope, joy, and shalom all combined together. In believing, so that you may abound in hope by the power of Holy Spirit. So Yahweh's calling us in Scripture to do something more than just getting caught in the hamster wheel of life and running around doing the same thing. It's compelling us to enter in a deeper relationship with him and find that joy unspeakable and full of glory. Yes, it's possible. Even if nothing changes in the circumstances of life, even if nothing naturally changes, you can have that joy because it comes from him. He wants us to seek that joy. And no matter what, that inward peace, that inward joy is secure because it's not affected by the circumstances and it's not dependent on the circumstances. John 16:22, Yeshua says, no man can take your joy. Okay, so if no man can take your joy, that means you control your joy. No, nothing can take it from you. You have to give it away. So don't give your joy away. Don't give it away. Next time if somebody cuts you off in traffic, ask yourself, is it worth giving them my joy? You know, next time something doesn't, somebody's rude to you, somebody maybe you never even met, might be somebody in Market Basket, they just happen to be passing you, they bumped into you with their cart or something, and they're rude to you. Are you going to give them your joy? Are they worth your joy? No. That delay, that negative comment, whatever may be going on, are you going to let it ruin your day? If something didn't seem to go your way, if something didn't seem to work out the way you wanted it or you thought it should work out, you're going to let it spoil your day? You know, the reason a lot of people are not happy is because they're constantly giving their joy away. Like joy is an indispensable commodity that you have plenty of it to just give away. No, at some point you keep giving your joy away, you're not going to have any left, and then you're going to be a miserable person to live with yourself. You're not going to like living with yourself. So the thing is, we can't control what other people do. We can't control what they say. We can't control what they do. but we can control how we respond and our attitude behind it. So we got to quit letting the same people upset us. We got to quit letting the same circumstances upset us. We got to quit letting these things steal our joy. And you know what? We can't pray these things away. You can't pray every frustrating person out of your life, much as you might want to. You cannot pray them all out of your life. Maybe you're meant to minister to them, okay? Even Paul had his messenger of Satan that was sent to buffet him. So if anything, if they really are getting on your nerves, then say, okay, Lord, I guess this is my messenger of Satan. But you have the grace to overcome it all. But what if that person doesn't change? That person who gets on your nerves, what if they never change? What if they're that way for, if Yeshua tarries, another 20 years? Might be a horrible thought to think of. But you know what? Don't spend 20 years giving your joy away on account of them. They might not change, but you can change. You can change your response. And, you know, we only have a short run in this race called life. You know, we're coming very close to that finish line. And it's way too short to live our lives frustrated. I'm tired, hear me right when I say this, I'm tired of living life frustrated. I'm tired of living one more day where something has gotten me upset. Something is stewing inside of me. Something has stolen my joy. Life's too short to let things steal our joy. People have a right to their opinion. They have a right to get upset with you. They have a right to do whatever they're going to do. But those things we can't control. We can control us. We can control whether we allow their negativity, their things, to upset us. You know, and by the way, if somebody's making negative comments about you, they wouldn't be saying anything about you if you weren't making a difference. You know, nobody talks about people that aren't doing anything. They're out doing nothing. So this verse I was referencing, Philippians 3:1. Finally, my brethren, rejoice in the Lord. To write the same things again is no trouble to me and is safeguard for you. Rejoice in the Lord. So he's saying it twice. So where are we to find that joy? In Yahweh, in his love for you, in your relationship with him. And that's where we can start going off track and seeking joy, when it is something that we're looking for in the flesh. Are you happy because you win? Or do you win because you're happy? Do you win because of the joy in you? If you're walking through life in a place of joy, that's setting you up for victory. You know, I heard this song, I think it was actually back around Christmas, and this song is talking about joy, and I like the words to it. It says, it's talking about, I think it used the tidings of comfort and joy. You know, we always think of that. But then it added this other thing to it. Joy that the world can't take away. Joy that the darkness cannot break. That will hold you through a lonely season. Joy that the heart cannot explain. That keeps you singing through the pain and holding to the reason for this joy. I liked those words because it's like, you know, it's not just, oh yeah, joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Where, you know, that doesn't keep you going. That can get annoying. But it's a joy that nothing can take away. It's a power. It's a power that resides inside of you. And it is deep down inside your heart. And it's meant to be something that holds you through any season in life. No matter what's going on around you, no matter what the enemy might be trying to throw your way, you can always stay in joy. Because in that joy is your strength. In that joy is your victory. In that joy is your shalom. You're holding to that. You know, Proverbs 17:22 tells us what a lack of joy does to the body physically. It says, a joyful heart is good medicine, but a broken spirit dries up the bones. I looked up a few different translations. If you are cheerful, you feel good. If you are sad, you hurt all over. Again, you notice that. If you have somebody who's depressed, oftentimes they're achy and this hurts and that hurts. Is there a connection? Happiness is good medicine, but sorrow is a disease. Another translation says, if you are happy in life, you will be healthy. But if you are sad and upset, your body will be weak. Another translation says, a joyful heart is good medicine, but depression drains one's strength. Another one says, a cheerful heart does good like medicine, but a broken spirit makes one sick. So if you want your strength drained and to be weak and broken, then stay depressed, if that's what you really want. But if that's not what you want, then find the joy. Find the joyful heart. And you notice it keeps saying heart. Heart is inside of you. It's not a joyful head. Joyful head is good medicine. It's a joyful heart. It's something that's deep inside of you that nothing on the outside can touch. That's why the Bible says so strongly about guarding your heart. The springs of life flow from your heart. Guard your heart. Don't allow anyone or anything to steal your joy or steal your peace. So a broken spirit or a depressed, sad, upset spirit can break down the body physically, but there was also a study that was published in May 2012 in the Archives of General Psychiatry that found that people who became depressed late in life had a 70% increased risk of dementia and Alzheimer's. 70% just from depression. And those who had been depressed since middle age were at 80% greater risk. That's shocking numbers. So even modern day medicine, researchers have long known that depression and dementia go hand in hand. That there's a connection between someone who is living in that state of depression and what happens to their mind. Solomon knew that. How did he know that? He knew it because Holy Spirit told him. The Lord told him, he revealed that to him. So these negative emotions, depression, sadness, anger, we talked about anger a little bit, those are things that are in conflict with joy. So we got to make sure that we're guarding our emotions. And by the way, anger, just like joy, is not connected to circumstances. It comes from within inside you. They're connected to your understanding, your outlook, your attitude about the circumstances of life. That's what you could just as easily choose to be happy as you could choose to be angry. You can choose. And so it is all connected to Yahweh's faithfulness. And the more that we allow that lack of joy in, the more it can cause us to become bitter, the more it can cause us to have that anger inside of us, and the more it can cloud our judgment to where we start to see our life as nothing, where we start to see us as the victim, and we start to see, we start in this place of misery and discontent, and all these things start happening, and it starts to corrode things in your life. It starts to wear away at that track, so to speak. And eventually it will lead to a major derailment that we don't want to happen. Joy, just like anger, can dominate everything around you, can dominate your relationships, can dominate. If you choose to focus on gratitude, it can bring contentment and shalom to even people around you. You can uplift a conversation if you're the one who's joyful in the midst of it. And it's impossible to be angry and joyful at the same time. You ever notice that? It's impossible. You just can't. You can't be angry and joyful at the same time. And you got to guard this. So reasons to rejoice. You say, what reason do I have to be joyful? Well, let's see. Yeshua sent Holy Spirit to us to teach us. That's a reason to be joyful. If we don't have to walk through this world ignorant. John 14:26, the Helper, the Holy Spirit whom the Father will send in my name, he will teach you all things and bring to your remembrance all that I said to you. Another reason to rejoice is Yeshua has given us his own shalom for the troubling times. That's a reason to rejoice. He's given us his own shalom. Think of it, the shalom that carried him through everything he walked through to the cross. Okay? That's the shalom he gave you. John 14:27, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives do I give to you. Do not let your hearts be troubled, nor let it be fearful. Don't let anything steal your shalom. Don't let anything move your heart. Don't let anything steal your joy. So it's like the concept of, if you're in a building, we were out by the by the ocean this last weekend, and there was a massive storm. It was supposed to be even worse than it was, because, you know, Mom gets into the middle of a storm and she's going to take authority over it and say, you know, we're here, so there's a reason why we're here. But it was supposed to cause flooding and damage and all this stuff, and the storm was moving in. And we're standing there looking out at the ocean. It's right there. And the waves had come completely over the beach. The beach was entirely covered. And the water's starting to come up the paths that lead down to the beach. And the wind was so hard that I looked over and my water bottle is shaking on the table. I mean, it's literally the house that we were in, the condo that we were in was shaking. But there wasn't a sense of fear about it, because you know that place is built strongly. It's built securely. It's weathered many storms there by the ocean. And so if you're in the middle, you can hear the roaring of the waves, and they're loud. You can hear the wind, and it's loud. But if you're in a building that's solidly built, even if you feel it shake, you're not going to be afraid, because you know that it's built strongly. And so as we're navigating these times that we're living in, we need to stay fixed and secure in the secret place of His presence. Then no matter how much the waves and the wind roar around us, no matter what's going on around us, we're not going to be afraid and we're not going to be shaken. Psalm 27:5 says, He will keep me safe in a pavilion. In the secret of His presence, He will hide me. Philippians 4:6-7 says, Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving. See, there's the thankfulness, there's the joy. Let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your hearts and your minds in Yeshua. So as we're walking through these times, we need to realize we can hold on to our shalom. We can hold on to our joy no matter what. It's not dependent on what's going on out there. It's dependent on where we are, where we're fixed. We're fixed. We're dwelling in the secret place. We're staying in His presence. We're staying in the Word. And if that's our anchor, then nothing is going to shake us. No matter what someone else might do, no matter what happens in the world around us, no matter how crazy things get, no matter what the enemy tries to throw at you, no matter where you are in the world, if you choose to, you can hold on to your shalom. He's given you His shalom. He's given you His joy. And that's what we are to hold on to. So in this month of Adar, as we're entering into, if we didn't increase our joy in the first Adar, we have a second opportunity now to do it. And if we did increase our joy in the first Adar, now we can make it even more strong. We want our joy to be complete in Him. He just go and look up all the scriptures on joy. He has a lot to say about joy. As a matter of fact, there's more scriptures about joy, and there's really no specific word about sadness in the Old Testament. A lot of times it says with tears to explain it, but there's a lot more about joy. So go and search it out and see how your life changes as you start spending time with Him in His presence, because in His presence is fullness of joy, and that joy is your strength. Amen. Thank you for joining us tonight on Facebook. We're glad you took the time out of your Tuesday to join us. We will see you on Saturday at 11 a.m. Until then, you have a blessed week.